Picture this, an innocent 8-year-old farm girl, her face bruised and spirit shaken, stands alone against a pack of cruel bullies who think they've won, but they're about to learn a shattering truth. Her mother is no ordinary woman, and vengeance is coming. Dive into this gripping, heart-pounding tale of justice, courage, and shocking twists that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Subscribe now to unlock this unforgettable 12,000-word story split into 4 explosive chapters and join thousands of readers in the USA and UK who can't stop talking about this epic saga of retribution and redemption. The sun hung low over the sprawling Nebraska cornfields, painting the horizon in hues of amber and gold. 8-year-old Clara Hensley trudged along the dirt path from school, her worn sneakers kicking up clouds of dust. Her pigtails bounced with each step, and her faded blue dress fluttered in the late summer breeze. Clara was small for her age, with freckles dusting her cheeks like stars, and eyes that held a quiet resilience. She carried a canvas satchel patched and fraying, filled with her school books, and a half-eaten apple. The path wound through the fields, a shortcut from the one-room schoolhouse to the Hensley farm, where she lived with her mother, Elisa, in a modest clapboard house. Clara hummed softly, a tune her mother had taught her, about sparrows finding their way home. It was a song of comfort, one she clung to on days like today, when the world felt heavier than her small shoulders could bear. Clara's life wasn't easy. The Hensley farm was small, barely scraping by, and the townsfolk of Willow Creek often whispered about Elisa Hensley, a woman who kept to herself, rarely venturing into town except for supplies. Some called her eccentric, others unkindly labeled her a recluse. Clara, though, adored her mother. Elisa was her rock, her storyteller, her protector. But today, Clara felt unprotected. The memory of what had happened at school burned in her chest. It wasn't the first time she'd been targeted, but it was the worst. The trouble had started at recess. Clara, as usual, sat alone under the big oak tree, sketching in her notebook, a gift from her mother. Her drawings were her escape, filled with fantastical creatures and far-off places. But a group of older boys, led by 12-year-old Tommy Granger, had other plans. Tommy was the son of the town's wealthiest farmer, a boy with a mean streak as wide as the Platte River. His gang, Billy, Nate, and Caleb, followed his lead, their laughter sharp and cruel. They'd been picking on Clara for weeks, calling her Raggedy Clara, because of her hand-me-down clothes, mocking her for living on what they called that dirt poor farm. Today, though, they'd gone further. It started with taunts. "Hey, Raggedy Clara, where's your pa?" "Oh, right, he ran off 'cause your M's a weirdo." Tommy had sneered, his friends cackling. Clara tried to ignore them, focusing on her sketch of a dragon soaring over mountains. But then Tommy snatched her notebook, tearing pages out and tossing them into the dirt. Clara's heart lurched. She lunged for the book, but Billy shoved her back, and she stumbled, scraping her knees. The boys laughed harder, circling her like vultures. Then Tommy grabbed a rock, small but heavy enough, and threw it. It struck Clara's temple, and pain exploded in her head. She fell, blood trickling down her cheek, her vision swimming. The boys froze for a moment as if surprised by their own cruelty, then scattered when the school teacher's whistle pierced the air. Clara hadn't cried, not then. She'd picked herself up, gathered her torn pages, and sat through the rest of class with a handkerchief pressed to her head. The teacher, Miss Larson, noticed the blood, but accepted Clara's quiet lie that she'd fallen. Clara didn't want trouble. She didn't want her mother to worry. But now, walking home, the tears came. They stung the cut on her temple, mixing with the blood that had dried in a thin line. She felt small, smaller than ever, and the weight of the boys' laughter pressed down on her. As she neared the edge of the cornfield, Clara heard footsteps behind her. Her heart sank. She turned to see Tommy and his gang, their grins wicked in the fading light. Thought you could run home and cry to your crazy my. Tommy taunted, picking up another rock. Clara's stomach twisted. She clutched her satchel and ran, her legs pumping as fast as they could. The boys chased their shouts, echoing through the stalks. Clara darted into the cornfield, hoping to lose them. But the rustling stalks betrayed her path. She tripped, sprawling into the dirt, and before she could scramble up, Tommy loomed over her. You're going to learn to stay quiet, Raggedy Clara, he said, raising the rock. But then a sound, a low guttural growl stopped him. Cold, it came from the shadows of the cornfield, deep and unnatural. The boys froze, their eyes wide. Clara, trembling, looked toward the sound. Something moved in the stalks. Something large. Tommy dropped the rock and stumbled back. What the hell was that? He whispered. The girl came again, closer now, and the boys bolted, crashing through the corn in a panic. Clara stayed on the ground, her heart pounding, unsure if she should be more afraid of the boys or whatever lurked in the field. Then, silence. She stood, shaky, and ran the rest of the way home. The Hensley farmhouse was a weathered relic, its paint peeling, but its porch sturdy. Clara burst through the door, her breath ragged. Elisa was in the kitchen stirring a pot of stew, her dark hair pulled back in a braid. She was tall with sharp green eyes that seemed to see through everything. Clara, what's wrong? She asked, dropping the spoon as she saw her daughter's bloodied face. Clara tried to speak, but the sobs came instead. Elisa knelt, pulling her close, her hands gentle but firm as she examined the wound. Who did this? She asked, her voice low. Dangerous. Clara hesitated, then whispered, Tommy Granger and his friends. Eliza's face hardened, but she said nothing more. Just cleaned Clara's cut and tucked her into bed with a promise that everything would be all right. But as Clara drifted to sleep, she heard her mother pacing the kitchen, muttering words she couldn't make out, words that sounded old, almost like a chant. And outside in the dark, the cornfield seemed to whisper back. The next morning, Clara woke to the smell of pancakes and the sound of her mother humming. The cut on her temple was bandaged, and though it throbbed, she felt safer in the light of day. Elisa was at the stove, her movements calm but precise, like a woman who knew exactly what she was doing. You're staying home today, she said, setting a plate in front of Clara. No arguments. Clara nodded, grateful. She didn't want to face Tommy or the others. Not yet. But the town of Willow Creek was already buzzing. Word of the incident had spread, as things do in small towns. By noon, a few neighbors stopped by ostensibly to check on Clara, but clearly fishing for gossip. Mrs. Carter, a nosy widow, clucked her tongue as she eyed Clara's bandage. Those Granger boys are trouble, she said. Their pa's got money though, so they get away with everything. Elisa smiled thinly, offering tea, but saying little. When the neighbors left, she sat with Clara, her expression unreadable. Tell me everything, she said. Clara recounted the bullying, the rock, the chase, and the strange growl in the cornfield. Elisa listened, her eyes narrowing at the mention of the sound. You're sure it was a girl? She asked. Clara nodded, describing how it had scared the boys off. Elisa's lips pressed into a line, but she didn't explain. Instead, she said, stay close to the house today. I need to go into town. Elisa's trips to town were rare, and Clara sensed something different in her mother's demeanor. Something steely. She watched from the porch as Eliza climbed into their old pickup truck and drove off, the engine coughing. Clara spent the day trying to capture the dragon from her torn notebook, but her mind kept drifting to the growl, Tommy's cruel face, to her mother's quiet intensity. In town, Elisa parked outside the general store and walked to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Danvers, a burly man with a penchant for avoiding trouble, looked up in surprise. Elisa Hensley, he said, leaning back in his chair. What brings you here? Elisa's voice was calm but cold. My daughter was attacked yesterday. Tommy Granger and his friends threw a rock at her head. Danvers frowned, scratching his beard. Kids being kids, Elisa, all talk to them, but Elisa cut him off. This wasn't kids being kids. Clarice, hurt. I want it handled. Danvers promised to look into it, but his tone was dismissive and Elisa left with a fire in her chest. She didn't go straight home. Instead, she drove to the Granger farm, a sprawling estate with a gleaming white house and a fleet of new tractors. She knocked on the door and Mrs. Granger, a prim woman in a floral dress, answered. Elisa, what's this about? Elisa explained the incident, her voice steady but laced with warning. Mrs. Granger's face palled, but her husband Tom Cern appeared, his expression hard. My boy wouldn't do that, he snapped. And if he did, well, kids fight. Your girl needs to toughen up. Eliza's eyes flashed, but she said nothing more, turning and leaving without another word. Back at home, Clara noticed her mother's tension, but didn't ask questions. That night, Elisa sat by the fireplace, staring into the flames. Clara crept downstairs, unable to sleep, and saw her mother holding an old leather book, its pages yellowed and covered in strange symbols. Elisa didn't notice her, too focused on the book, her lips moving silently. Clara felt a chill, not from the night air, but from something deeper, something she couldn't name. The next day, the bullying escalated. Tommy and his gang, emboldened by their parents' indifference and the sheriff's inaction, cornered Clara's best friend, Sophie, at school. Sophie was a shy girl who'd stood up for Clara before. They pushed her into the dirt, warning her to stay away from Raggedy Clara, or face worse. Sophie ran to the Hensley farm after school, tears streaming, and told Clara everything. Clara's heart broke, but she also felt a spark of anger. She told her mother, expecting comfort. Instead, Elisa's face darkened. Enough, she said almost to herself. This ends now. That night, Clara awoke to a strange sound. A rhythmic tapping like rain but sharper. She peered out her window and saw her mother in the backyard standing in a circle of stones she'd never noticed before. Elisa was chanting, her voice low and melodic, the old book open in her hands. The air felt thick, charged, and Clara swore she saw shadows moving in the cornfield. Though the night was still, she went back to bed, her mind racing, wondering what her mother was doing and why it felt so dangerous. The next morning, Willow Creek was different. A strange fog hung over the town, thick and unnatural, clinging to the streets like a shroud. Clara went to school, despite her fear because Elisa insisted. You're stronger than they are, she said, her eyes fierce. Clara clung to those words, but her stomach churned as she approached the schoolhouse. Tommy and his gang were there, smirking, but something was off. They looked pale, their eyes darting nervously. Clara overheard Billy whispering to Nate. Did you hear it last night? That sound in the fields. Nate nodded, his face ashen. Class dragged on, but at recess, the boys didn't approach Clara. Instead, they kept their distance, huddling by the fence. Clara noticed Tommy rubbing his arm where a strange bruise had appeared, a perfect circle like a burn. She tried to focus on her drawings, but the air felt heavy, and the other children whispered about odd things. Animals acting strangely, lights flickering in their homes, and dreams of shadows chasing them through cornfields. That afternoon, as Clara walked home, she saw something that made her stop. A crow dead lay in the middle of the path, its feathers scorched as if by fire. Clara stepped around at her heart pounding, and hurried home. Elisa was in the garden tending to her herbs, but her hands were stained with something dark. Not dirt, but something thicker. Ma, what's happening? Clara asked. Elisa smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Just nature taking its course, she said. Clara didn't believe her. That night, The town's unease grew. Tommy Granger didn't show up to school the next day. Word spread that he'd been found in his room screaming about a woman in the shadows who'd burned his arm. His parents called it a nightmare, but the bruise on his arm was real and it was spreading. Billy and Nate were next, both waking with similar marks, their stories eerily similar. A figure in the dark, a voice like Elisa's, whispering warnings. The townsfolk began to talk, their whispers turning to accusations. Elisa Hensley was no ordinary woman, they said. Some remembered old stories, rumors that her family had once been tied to strange rituals, to powers no one could explain. Clara overheard these whispers when she went to the general store with her mother. The townsfolk stared, some crossing the street to avoid them. Elisa seemed unfazed, but Clara felt the weight of their fear. At home, she confronted her mother. "Ma, are you doing something to them?" To Tommy and the others, Eliza's eyes softened, but her voice was firm. "I'm protecting you, Clara. That's all you need to know." But Clara couldn't shake the feeling that her mother was hiding something big. The truth began to unravel when Sophie came to the farm, her face pale. "Clara, you need to see this," she said, pulling her to the edge of the cornfield. There, hidden among the stalks, was a circle of stones, just like the one Clara had seen her mother use. But this one was older. The ground within it blackened as if burned. Sophie whispered, "My grandma says your M's family used to be witches. They could do things, Clara. Bad things." Clara laughed it off, but the words stuck in her mind. Which it was. Ridiculous, wasn't it? Yet the growl in the cornfield, the bruises, the fog. It all felt connected. That night, Clara snuck into her mother's room and found the leather book. She opened it, her hands trembling, and saw pages filled with symbols, drawings of circles, and words in a language she didn't understand. One page showed a figure, a woman, surrounded by shadows, her hands raised. Clara's breath caught. Was this her mother before she could read more? Elisa appeared in the doorway, her face a mix of anger and fear. "You shouldn't be touching that," she said, taking the book. But Clara demanded answers, and, for the first time, Elisa relented. She told Clara a story, not the kind with dragons, but one rooted in their family's past. The Hensleys, she said, came from a line of women who could speak to the earth. They weren't witches, not in the way people thought, but they had power. Power to protect, to heal, and when needed to punish. Eliza had sworn never to use it, but when Clara was hurt, something in her snapped. "I called on the old ways," she admitted, "to teach those boys a lesson. But it's not done yet." Clara's heart raced. "What's not done?" she asked. Elisa didn't answer, but her eyes were haunted. The next day, Willow Creek was in chaos. Tommy Granger was missing. His parents found his room empty, the window open, and a trail of scorched earth leading into the cornfields. The sheriff organized a search party, but the fog was thicker now, almost suffocating, and the field seemed to shift, disorienting the searchers. Whispers of Elisa's involvement grew louder and a mob gathered outside the Hensley farm led by Tom Granger. "Soon, you did this," he shouted, pounding on the door. "You and your devil magic." Eliza faced them, calm but unyielding. "Go home," she said. "This isn't your fight." But the mob wouldn't leave, and Clara, watching from the window, saw fear and anger in their faces. She ran to her mother, begging her to stop whatever she was doing. Elisa knelt, her voice soft. "I'm fixing this, Clara, for you." But Clara saw the strain in her mother's eyes, the way her hands trembled. That night, Clara followed Elisa to the stone circle. In the backyard, the chanting was louder, now, the air crackling with energy. Shadows moved in the cornfield, not just one, but many, their forms indistinct, but menacing. Clara hid, watching as her mother raised her hands, the book opened before her. The shadows surged forward,